For more than 3 decades, at the exact moment his program went on air, millions of American families would switch on their black and white television sets to welcome a man with a gentle smile, an accordion in his hands and soap bubbles drifting softly through the air. To the public, Lawrence Welk was the purest symbol of champagne music and traditional family values. But behind that warm smile and charmingly awkward speech was a reality that the media of the time never truly touched upon. Lawrence Welk had lived a double life for many years. Only recently have the hidden corners of that darkness concealing an empire of power, wealth, and uncompromising principles finally come into the light. To understand why a man would spend his entire life building a fortress around himself, one must travel back to the bitterly cold winters of Strasburg, North Dakota, at the beginning of the 20th century. Lawrence Welk's instinct for secrecy, his extreme caution, and his desire to control everything were not born beneath the bright lights of Hollywood. They were forged by the bone-chilling cold of poverty, the loneliness of an outsider child, and the fragile line between life and death. Born in 1903 into a family of German-Russian immigrants, Lawrence Welk grew up in a sod house amid the vast windswept plains of North Dakota. His family had fled persecution and poverty in Europe, in the hope of finding a brighter future in the New World, but the price they paid was complete isolation. In that small village, English was a foreign and distant language. Lawrence grew up in a closed community where only German was spoken. It was not until he entered his teenage years that he began to speak his first words of English. The language barrier, combined with his heavy and awkward accent, became a burden that followed him throughout his childhood. Lawrence was frequently mocked by other children whenever he stepped beyond the boundaries of his community. The fear of ridicule and contempt because of his humble origins took root deep within the mind of the poor young boy, planting seeds of bitter insecurity, while simultaneously igniting a quiet determination for vindication. One day, he would make all those who looked down on him bow their heads. Poverty in Strasbourg was not merely a lack of food and clothing. It was a constant sense of insecurity that threatened survival every day. When Lawrence was 11 years old, a devastating hemorrhagic fever swept through the region and struck him down. For weeks, Lawrence drifted in and out of consciousness on the boundary between life and death. When the fever finally passed, it left him physically weakened and burdened with a cruel consequence. He was forced to leave school permanently after completing only the 4th grade. The end of his education meant that Lawrence was excluded from the conventional path of learning. He returned to the fields, hoe in hand, and feet buried in the mud, facing a harsh reality. If he did not save himself, his life would be buried forever in those impoverished settlements. Grueling labor from childhood forged extraordinary endurance within Lawrence, but music became the only escape that preserved a piece of his soul. Night, after exhausting hours in the fields, Lawrence would listen to his father play an old accordion. Those simple German folk melodies were the only light that warmed his barren spirit, helping him realize that music was not merely a source of joy, but the only ticket that could free him from the plow and the dust. He longed to own a professional accordion of his own, a high-quality instrument made in Italy, costing as much as $400, an enormous sum in the 1920s equivalent to a substantial fortune at the time. For a poor farming family, such an amount seemed unimaginable. But ambition would not allow Lawrence to surrender. He approached his father, Ludwig Welk, and proposed a life-defining agreement in which he was willing to trade his youthful freedom for the tool that could transform his future. Under that bitter arrangement, Lawrence agreed to remain on the family farm, working as an unpaid laborer until his 21st birthday, while also handing over every small amount he earned from playing music at local weddings. In return, his father would borrow money to purchase the accordion of his dreams. For years afterwards, Lawrence worked tirelessly on the fields of Strasbourg, where every drop of sweat brought him one step closer to freedom. That harsh contract with his own father taught him his first hard lesson in life. Nothing in this world comes free, and anyone who wishes to gain power and independence must be prepared to endure the harshest bargains in the shadows. On his 21st birthday, when his obligation to the family finally ended, Lawrence Welk picked up the $400 accordion purchased with his youth and labor and left the family farm. He stepped into the outside world without qualifications, without fluency in English, and without a penny to his name. That accordion was far more than a musical instrument. It represented survival, the price of freedom paid in blood and sweat. Because of that, the fear of losing everything and the fear of returning to poverty were always waiting to consume him. Lawrence realized that the outside world was a ruthless wilderness where an awkward, uneducated immigrant like himself could be crushed at any moment if he did not create his own armor for protection. From the moment he walked away, Lawrence Welk made an unspoken decision that would shape the rest of his life. He would never again allow anyone to control his destiny. To survive, he had to learn how to conceal his weaknesses. He transformed the awkward speech and accent that had once been mocked into a trademark of authenticity and gentleness that reassured the world. Yet behind that innocent appearance was a mind operating at full speed, calculating every move, every dollar, and every relationship. The origins of the double life that Lawrence Welk would later live did not begin with simple greed. They began with that harsh survival instinct. He created a perfect public image, kind, respectable, and safe to conceal a cold and disciplined strategist willing to do whatever was necessary to protect the empire he had spent his entire childhood paying for and building. As the bright lights of Hollywood television studios illuminated the 1950s, America entered a period of profound change. Amid the turbulence of the Cold War, the rise of youth culture, and the explosive popularity of rock and roll, the public longed for a comforting, wholesome, and dependable source of stability. Recognizing that longing, Lawrence Welk created one of the most remarkable and sophisticated media illusions in television history, the champagne music brand and the image of the kindest, most virtuous man in America. On the airwaves of KTLA and later, the renowned ABC network, The Lawrence Welk Show, appeared as a peaceful paradise to tens of millions of viewers. It was a place where alcohol, drugs, or any suggestive behavior never appeared. The screen overflowed with gently floating soap bubbles, impeccably tailored suits, radiant smiles, and soothing melodies that captivated audiences. To reinforce this flawless image, Welk cleverly turned the very weaknesses of his youth into his most harmless and effective media weapons. His hesitant English, heavily accented German speech, and awkward, self-conscious manner of presentation, once the source of deep childhood insecurity, became valuable elements of his personal brand. His hesitant count of a 1 and a 2, and his gentle, down-to-earth smile led viewers across America to regard him as a beloved father or grandfather figure. People assumed that a man so innocent he could barely pronounce English correctly could never be deceptive or calculating. Yet, behind the camera, that seemingly innocent old man possessed an extraordinarily sharp business mind and a chilling degree of ruthlessness. Welk understood better than anyone that his on-screen innocence served as an iron shield protecting him from media scrutiny. The more awkward and respectable he appeared, the easier it became to conceal the vast financial operations and absolute authority he exercised behind the scenes, to ensure that this protective curtain remained spotless. Welk imposed a strict regime upon his orchestra and singers, those whom he affectionately referred to as the musical family. On television, they appeared as a loving, close-knit family, overflowing with warmth and unity. In reality, behind the velvet curtain stood a system of control that was rigid and suffocating. Welk enforced uncompromising moral standards upon all his employees. No tattoos, no drinking, no romantic scandals of any kind, and even strict oversight of their clothing and personal conduct outside work. Anyone who threatened to tarnish the pure image he had spent a lifetime building was removed without hesitation. The television storm of 1959 became perhaps the clearest example of the ruthlessness hidden behind the champagne smile. Alice Lawn, the beautiful and immensely popular singer whom audiences affectionately called the Champagne Lady, was dismissed immediately after an accidental incident in which too much of her leg was visible while sitting at a piano during filming. Despite widespread public outrage, thousands of protest letters and calls to boycott the program in support of Alice Lawn, Welk remained completely unmoved. To him, no individual, regardless of popularity, was permitted to compromise the moral image he had worked so tirelessly to create. That uncompromising severity was not merely religious conservatism, it was the instinct of a master media strategist. Welk understood that his image of decency was the most valuable commercial product he possessed. To protect that product, he was willing to sacrifice anyone, crush any sign of rebellion, before it could grow and maintain absolute authority over every person working under him. Thanks to the curtain of champagne music, woven from soap bubbles and strict moral standards, Lawrence Welk successfully concealed a carefully calculated double life. The public remained enchanted by his gentle melodies, never realizing that the kind-hearted man on screen was in reality a cold and calculating tycoon quietly directing a powerful financial empire behind the scenes. While much of America was captivated by the soothing sounds of champagne music and believed Lawrence Welk to be a benevolent band leader who treated his orchestra like cherished family members, the reality behind the stage curtain was entirely different. The moment the warm smile disappeared and the cameras stopped rolling, that beloved father figure cast aside his respectable facade and became a ruthless manager, a cold financial operator driven by a predator's instinct. While the Lawrence Welk Show generated millions of dollars for television networks and brought enormous profits to Welk himself, the musicians who provided the soul of the program lived under a remarkably harsh system. Welk managed his orchestra with what could only be described as an iron fist. He took full advantage of the performers' desire for fame and their loyalty, pressuring them into signing demanding contracts. Many talented musicians and gifted singers who performed weekly on national television received only the minimum salaries required by union regulations. Welk flatly refused to share revenue percentages or pay image royalties. When a performer gathered the courage to enter his office and request a pay rise, they received neither understanding nor compassion, but a cold warning. If they were dissatisfied, they were free to leave immediately, because hundreds of others were waiting outside to take their place. This exploitation extended beyond finances and penetrated deeply into the emotional lives of his performers. Welk maintained an atmosphere of fear and suspicion throughout the entire organization. Anyone who displayed dissatisfaction considered organizing for better conditions, or simply became too prominent beyond his sphere of influence, could be punished by reduced screen time relegation to less visible roles or immediate dismissal. To Welk, the performers were not partners or family members as he proudly claimed on television. They were merely interchangeable components in his money-making machine. However, the greatest secret of Lawrence Welk's double life was not hidden in the way he managed his orchestra, but in the enormous fortune he quietly built behind the scenes. While America believed he was simply an accordion player earning a living from performances, Welk was steadily transforming himself into one of the most powerful and wealthy real estate magnates in Hollywood. Understanding the fragility of the entertainment industry from his difficult days in North Dakota, Welk never placed all his eggs in one basket. Every dollar he earned from music was transformed into land buildings and commercial developments. Through his family company Teleclue Productions, he quietly acquired a vast portfolio of valuable properties along the west coast of America, ranging from bustling shopping centers and office towers to thousands of acres of strategically located land throughout California. The pinnacle of this hidden empire was the Lawrence Welk Resort Complex in San Diego, a sprawling development of resorts, golf courses, and luxury residential communities covering hundreds of hectares. Thanks to his sharp financial instincts and uncompromising negotiating style, Welk accumulated a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He became one of the wealthiest entertainers in the history of the American entertainment industry at that time. What is remarkable is how successfully Welk concealed the true scale of his wealth from public view. He continued to appear on television as a humble elderly man driving modest vehicles and speaking about frugal living. This outwardly modest lifestyle not only helped him maintain the affection of working-class Americans, but also served as a sophisticated strategy to avoid unwanted attention from tax authorities and financial demands from associates. Behind the sweet champagne smile and the gently floating soap bubbles stood a heart of steel forged by poverty. Lawrence Welk lived a complete double life, a kindly entertainer on screen who won the affection of the public, and a ruthless tycoon behind the scenes who accumulated power and wealth with relentless determination. If Lawrence Welk appeared to the outside world as both America's beloved bandleader and a highly skilled real estate magnate behind the closed doors of his family life, he remained a far more tragic mystery. His private life was not filled with music and laughter as it appeared on television. It was a world of silence, loneliness, and profound inner conflict, a place where a man spent his entire life searching for security, yet never truly found peace. For decades, the American public admired the marriage between Lawrence Welk and Fern Renner as a lasting symbol of love and fidelity. They married in 1931, when Welk was still a struggling musician traveling across the Midwestern states, and they remained together until the end of his life. Yet behind the perfect image of a model family lay an enormous emotional void that Fern quietly carried for many years. Welk was consumed by work to an almost obsessive degree. To him, every moment not spent creating value, managing operations, or planning for the future produced a sense of anxiety and vulnerability. This relentless dedication pushed his beloved wife into a life of isolation. While Welk immersed himself in stage performances, board meetings, and multi-million-dollar property deals, Fern was left to raise their children and manage the household largely on her own. The distance between them did not stem from infidelity or betrayal. Welk remained steadfastly faithful to his Catholic vows, but from his own emotional reserve. His fear of vulnerability and lifelong habit of concealing his feelings rooted in childhood experiences made him emotionally distant as both a husband and a father. He loved his family, but he expressed that love through control and rigid expectations. His children grew up beneath the enormous shadow of their father, constantly careful not to damage the spotless reputation he had spent a lifetime creating. The most tragic note in Lawrence Welk's double life was the intense inner conflict between religious faith and personal ambition. Welk was a deeply devoted Catholic. He attended church regularly, prayed before performances, donated millions of dollars to charitable causes, and helped build churches. He sincerely believed that his success was a gift from God, and always sought to live as a model believer. Yet that very faith became a psychological burden that tightened around him night after night. How could a devout Catholic who constantly spoke about compassion and humility also be a ruthless manager, willing to leave longtime associates struggling over disputes about compensation? How could a man devoted to God employ such sharp business tactics, exploiting every legal advantage to outmaneuver competitors and expand an immense fortune? The struggle between religious teachings of compassion and the harsh survival instincts of a business magnate created a profound contradiction within Welk. He lived with this silent conflict but never allowed himself to retreat. To ease his conscience, he gave even more to charity and imposed even stricter moral standards upon himself and those around him. Yet behind the innocent champagne smile presented to the cameras, his eyes never fully concealed the exhaustion of a man forced to wear two masks at all times. Within the shadows of his luxurious yet emotionally distant home, Lawrence Welk entered the final years of his life, not with the serenity of a legend, but with the profound loneliness of someone who had concealed his true self for so long that even he could no longer distinguish between the real man and the role he played upon the stage of life. Every secret, no matter how carefully hidden beneath layers of sophistication, eventually yields to the relentless passage of time. In 1992, at the age of 89, Lawrence Welk passed away, bringing to a close a life that had spanned nearly a century. The media mourned his passing as a significant loss to American culture, filling tributes with admiration for the king of champagne music. Yet, as the music finally faded and the velvet curtain closed forever, the curtain concealing Welk's double life also began to fall piece by piece. The first cracks appeared when former members of his orchestra, individuals who had remained silent for decades out of fear of Welk's influence and authority, began to speak openly. Only after the Pope of the entertainment world was gone did they feel able to describe what had truly taken place behind the television cameras. A series of memoirs and interviews that followed painted a dramatically different picture of life inside the Lawrence Welk Show. People were startled to learn that behind the warm atmosphere and cheerful smiles seen on television existed a system governed by fierce psychological control and rigid discipline. Performers described feeling overworked, trapped by restrictive contracts, and constantly anxious about being dismissed over minor personal matters. The image of the loving and united musical family that Welk had so carefully promoted was revealed to many as a meticulously crafted media narrative maintained with remarkable precision. Not stopping there, the auditing and settlement of Welk's estate after his death opened a financial Pandora's box. Investigative journalists and entertainment reporters gained access to confidential financial records that revealed the true scale of the real estate empire and investment holdings he had quietly controlled. The public was stunned to discover that the gentle, modest man they had admired was in fact an exceptionally shrewd businessman who possessed hundreds of millions of dollars and had been involved in numerous land and copyright disputes that were resolved with remarkable discretion. As these revelations came to light, they created a profound psychological shock for many of his loyal followers. Welk's friendly smile in old recordings suddenly seemed different. It no longer appeared to be a symbol of pure innocence, but rather of extraordinary emotional control. Cultural historians and media scholars began reassessing Lawrence Welk's legacy through a more nuanced and realistic lens. He was no longer viewed merely as an accordion player or a television personality, but as a media visionary far ahead of his time. Someone who understood the power of personal branding and skillfully capitalized on America's desire for stability during the Cold War era. Welk gave the public exactly what they wanted to see, and he protected that carefully crafted image with unwavering determination. The truth about Lawrence Welk's double life does not diminish his significance, but it does dismantle the flawless monument that once surrounded him and restores him to his full humanity, a complex and deeply contradictory figure. He was a man who escaped extreme poverty and spent his life constructing a fortress of wealth and influence, yet at the same time became a lifelong prisoner within the very fortress he created. As the curtain of history finally closes and the haze of time gradually fades away, the story of Lawrence Welk is no longer simply the story of a television star from the 1950s. It becomes a profound reflection on human nature when confronted with power, the desire for security, and the cost of maintaining a legend. His double life leaves behind a thoughtful and sobering meditation on the boundary between public glory and the darkness that often exists behind it. Looking back on Lawrence Welk's nearly century-long journey, one cannot help but be struck by the coexistence of two entirely different individuals within a single man. On one side stood the Lawrence Welk, known to the public, a source of warmth and positivity for millions of American households. A humble man with a gentle smile, a symbol of purity, Catholic faith, and enduring family values. Yet on the other side existed a different Lawrence Welk, a cold and calculating businessman driven by powerful survival instincts, a manager who ruled with an iron hand, and a seasoned real estate operator willing to set aside emotion in pursuit of power and wealth. What is remarkable is that these seemingly opposing identities depended upon one another for survival. The image of the kind and benevolent entertainer served as an iron shield protecting the businessman from media scrutiny. At the same time, his immense hidden fortune provided the financial independence that allowed him to maintain complete control over his television empire without ever becoming dependent upon major corporations or broadcasting networks. I transformed his life into a masterwork of image management, where every smile and every hesitant gesture on stage contributed to a long-term strategy for survival and success. The greatest tragedy of Lawrence Welk's life may have been that he succeeded brilliantly in creating a perfect world for his audience while imprisoning himself within an emotional prison of his own making. The fear of poverty that had haunted him since childhood in Strasbourg never truly left him. Even after accumulating hundreds of millions of dollars and winning the affection of an entire nation, he continued to live in a state of constant vigilance. He could never fully relax, never completely reveal his true feelings, and never place absolute trust in anyone, not even his closest family members or longtime associates. His story serves as a powerful reminder about the nature of cultural icons. What audiences see on television or through the media is often a carefully constructed commercial product. Behind every seemingly flawless image lies conflict calculation and a price paid in real life. Human beings are never simply black or white. Lawrence Welk was neither a pure villain nor a saintly figure. He was in many ways a product of circumstance, a man who escaped poverty, used discipline and calculation to protect his dreams, and employed kindness as a key to winning over the world. Decades after the Lawrence Welk Show ended production, the gentle melodies of champagne music continue to echo through reruns on American public television. The delicate soap bubbles drifting across the screen appear like fading remnants of a bygone era. Yet the story of the man who created them continues to whisper difficult lessons about the entertainment industry and the nature of ambition. Lawrence Welk may be gone, but his legacy, both comforting and unsettling, still casts a long shadow over the history of modern media. When an empire is built entirely upon the absolute control of a single individual, the departure of that individual often leads to decline or transformation. After Welk's death, the Lawrence Welk Resort Complex, and the family companies continued operating, but no one could fully recreate the distinctive spirit and uncompromising standards that had defined him. His descendants inherited a vast fortune and became capable business managers, but not the extraordinary media strategist their grandfather had been. Looking back at the performers who devoted their youth to Welk's musical family, one encounters a sobering reality. Many spent their lives serving a dream that was not entirely their own, receiving modest compensation while surrendering control over their public image. Once they stepped beyond Welk's shadow, some discovered that they were already too old to begin again and that their brief television fame had consumed their most productive years. Many felt gratitude toward Welk for giving them the opportunity to perform on a national stage. Yet they also carried quiet wounds from a leader who never truly regarded them as family. Ultimately, Lawrence Welk's double life leaves a lasting reflection for anyone who wishes to understand the nature of fame. In a modern world where flawless public images continue to be manufactured daily through media and social platforms, his story serves as a warning from the past. It reminds us that public kindness can sometimes function as a form of branding, and that the most effective manipulators are often those who convince others that they are being generously rewarded. Lawrence Welk lived the life he wanted. He escaped poverty, rose to extraordinary wealth and influence, protected his family from hardship, and secured his place in history as an unforgettable cultural figure. Yet, to achieve all of that he paid a significant personal price. He permanently locked away parts of his heart, reduced many relationships to matters of calculation, and wore the same smiling mask until the very end. As evening settles over the luxurious resort in San Diego that bears his name, one can almost imagine the wind moving through the trees like the sigh of a legend who spent a lifetime conquering the world, yet never once allowed the world to fully see the man behind the image. What do you think about Lawrence Welk's double life? Was the ruthlessness and calculation hidden behind the scenes a necessary price for success and security in a difficult world? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe so you do not miss future in-depth investigations into legendary historical figures, and share this story with anyone who enjoys compelling stories from the worlds of history and media.